welcome everyone. Day 4 of the Linking Your Thinking conference continues. Really excited for this one. This is going to be excited. I've August Bradley here, if you can believe it. How you doing?
I can't believe it. I am super happy to be here. This is super fun for me. I really appreciate the opportunity to explore ideas with you and everybody else.
Yeah, totally. So a lot of these have been presentations. This one's a discussion, and we're definitely going to lean hard on everybody who has joined. So this is actually quite the treat, because if you have questions, we're going to be digging in more to that. It's going to be a little bit more interactive. We'll take breaks to see how things are going in the chat, because we want to make sure that it's touching upon everybody's needs. And also, I think it'll just be fun to chat everything between PKM and life design.
There's a lot of overlap.
Indeed. Yeah. So for those who might not know and maybe just joined, whatever, a quick intro for you, August is one of the, I'd say, leading voices when it comes to putting together a life operating system, specifically in Notion. And it's one of the most well thought out programs around. And if I were to make a caricature of myself, it'd probably be everything is a map. And then I think with you, August, to be everything is systems.
Yes, I'm huge on systems thinking, system design to fuel and guide better living.
Love it. I love it. And that really comes across and how you've put everything together. And I don't think I've really talked about this too much yet. It's something I'm going to be talking about more in the future. But although I do all my personal knowledge management in Obsidian, as our team is growing, I actually jumped into August's Notion Life Design program for our team, so we can start to communicate more effortlessly that way. And I didn't have the time to set up anything from scratch. So I was like, well, I trust August. And so we just kind of jumped into that tool and learning as we go, and we haven't even gone through the entire curriculum. It's already paying dividends though, and just really happy. So, I mean, I just want to give you that shout out. It's been great.
Awesome. Appreciate that. Super excited to have you a part of that. And I've equally been enjoying your training and programs, and the Obsidian Flight School has been my guide in Obsidian. So we're learning from each other, and I think it's awesome.
Well, likewise. All right, mutual admiration party. We're past that part. And so yeah, just generally, we want to have this discussion again to explore where knowledge management fits within larger life systems and team collaborations, and also to see where knowledge management, the role it has for enhancing these larger systems that we are all a part of. And I just want to ask, maybe for a little bit before we dive into the nuts and bolts, is just kind of how you got here, because I'm very curious. You know, what got you into systems?
Well, systems are everywhere, so you can get into systems from anywhere. But in my case, I had a very zigzaggy career path. I've been all over the place, and I highly recommend that. I think it's awesome. I think life is about experiences and a diverse, rich range of experiences. But the ones where systems really started clicking is a certain, again, this is in the middle of a zigzaggy path, but I ended up running a production company for doing TV commercials. So sort of small to mid-size TV commercials. And when you're doing that, there are so many moving parts. There's so many pieces. You have different clients, every project has a lot of complexity to it. And then you have multiple projects running at different stages simultaneously in parallel. And so you have all this going on, all these people to coordinate. And that's when I really started implementing systems. I mean, with very deliberate thought, as opposed to just patching and reacting. And so that was my deepest first effort to design systems that would bring transparency to everything going on, clarity to all the different participants, and designing for an objective result, quality work at the end of the day, and happy customers. But there's a lot that goes into delivering that. So I started doing that and really honing and refining systems. That led to, I was trying to build this production company. I kind of hit a plateau. I was doing well, but I wanted to get into that top level. I wanted to make Super Bowl commercials. I wanted to go all the way, and I just couldn't break into the upper echelon. I looked around. I saw declining field. So the industry was kind of declining. And I saw those that were in that top tier I wanted to get into were all came from top ad agencies, brought clients with them. They didn't claw their way up with content. So I tried and eventually just felt like hitting a wall. So I had an opportunity to join some friends who had started a really pioneering virtual reality and augmented reality company. And they invited me to be the COO of the company. So that because I had been running the operations and the systems of this production company, I had a lot of relevant skills. It was still production, but it was more post heavy, more VFX heavy. It's, it's Unreal Engine and all that stuff. So I went over there to bring systems and efficiency in place there. And that was great. And then that led to working with a wider range of clients in emerging tech, AI, VR, AR, all kinds of stuff. But what I was finding working with all those companies that were small, well-funded companies with very strong, dominant owners and leaders, is that we could put the best systems in place. It didn't matter how good and well-designed our company systems. The lives of the founders and owners were so deeply intertwined with the companies. If their lives were in chaos, it just unraveled the systems of the company. And I had eventually realized and increasingly discovered and worked at bringing systems to their lives so that they could operate effectively at peak performance and the companies could, and then everything worked well. But if you had these strong personalities who were deeply intertwined with the business, small companies, then it just didn't work with the business side alone. So that's when I started developing personal, what I now call life operating systems.
Interesting.
Yeah, that was the path.
Yeah. Well, for one, I mean, like starting in a pressure cooker of any sort of production is really going to, yeah, you're either going to sink or swim. And by putting together apparently the systems that you have, I mean, you were able to swim quite effectively.
Yeah,
and
brought
whatever
order
came out of that.
And just you can raise the performance of an individual so high by bringing the right systems into place, identifying the right priorities, prioritizing, and then putting the guardrails and support structures in place to facilitate the right behaviors on the right things. It all comes down to that. But then I started experimenting on myself, tweaking and modifying to figure out what to then bring to clients. And then I discovered Notion, which let me actually design the software myself, which got me away from duct taping and zapping everything together. So that was my evolution toward Notion as well.
Yeah, I just think that's really fascinating because I think my experience has been the reverse where, well, I guess I've used systems and knowledge management with teams, but it's always come from more of an internal spot first. And now, it feels as though with this remote team, there's a true demand to have a good knowledge management system, collaboratively speaking. But whereas for you, you kind of started from the team production centric area and then figured out like, hey, if it works here, how can we then make it for
professionally I did. I should say I've always been deep into personal development and psychology for peak performance, that kind of thing. So I did always have this in the back of my mind, and I was always experimenting with software and tech for my own use case. But I took it to a new level in terms of effort and dedication and study when I started applying it for clients. So nothing like teaching is one of the best ways to learn and to facilitate your understanding and ability to do any skill set.
And there is a system. So kind of curious to get your definitions on systems, because teaching, and a lot of us on this call and are listening, there's some aspect of us that is sharing online. So there's like some sort of content creation thing going on. Not everyone. We're also managing projects or D&D campaigns, but well, that's sharing too. And there's some sort of path happening. And yeah, it just seems as though, I don't know, how would you describe the systems in general? Like what's an entry level way to look at systems?
Oh, what systems are, just a fundamental understanding.
Yeah.
If you look at the definition, the dictionary definition, it's actually not that helpful. It's just parts moving together in some kind of unison. But more, I think it's more helpful to think of systems as cause and effect. Everything is cause and effect. And you're identifying these loops, these repeating patterns of cause and effect. And every cause will have one or more effects, and every effect then itself becomes a cause to another effect. And you have this cascading series of cause and effect everywhere. So in whatever system you're looking at, you're trying to understand, usually you're trying to understand the effects, the outcomes. Why are these outcomes happening? How can I change it? And you start looking for, in the proper thing to do is start looking for what the causes are. But what you realize is however you've defined the system, that system is part of a bigger system. And so, and virtually always, there are causes triggering these cascading causes and effects outside of the initial system you're looking at, yet the effects are happening inside your system. So it can look arbitrary or random or just inexplainable if you're just looking in the one system. And the study of systems thinking is to look broader and more holistically, look at the systems that your system's a part of and the cause and effect patterns that are happening and they're initiating outside of however you define the first system, because we're drawing arbitrary lines for any given system. It's part of a much more vast, larger system. And then that larger system is part of a larger system. And so it's the practice of looking broader for the original causes triggering the effects that you're interested in. And then ultimately that will just let you bring insights to any conversation, to any exploration or learning process, looking broader, looking for root causes of the chain of cause and effects that you're trying to understand. The ultimate skill is to be able to design systems and design the cause and effect patterns that you want to achieve the results you want. So there's the looking to understand, and then there's the looking to design. But either way, it's fundamentally systems thinking is looking more holistically, but systems are patterns of cause and effect. And then the most powerful element or type of these cause and effects is the feedback loop. That's where you have a repeating series of cause and effects, where each iteration, the previous iteration, pours momentum and energy and resources into the next iteration, and then so forth to the next iteration, and they build up and build up, or they are declining, they're destroying, they're tearing down, they're weakening, fewer resources, less momentum into the next iteration, and they spin down. So much of what we're trying to do here is understand where are they building up and how can we create ones that build, and identifying the ones that are destroying and deteriorating, how can we stop those? That's fundamentally what we're trying to do here with systems.
They're so fascinating, and there are many areas I want to take that. Some of them are really niche, and I'm going to save those for later, just so we don't get into that. But I'm curious about where does so a feedback loop is a feedback loop, but would you say it's a positive? Like, what is a positive feedback loop? Is it even necessary to say positive, or is that just a redundant word?
Well, no, it depends on the context, but for our context, life design, knowledge management, a positive feedback loop is a loop that's building and growing or shrinking, but it's causing an expansion or decline in a consistent direction, more and more in that direction. It's positive if it's beneficial to us. It's negative if it's harmful to us. So let's just in our context, look at it from the outcomes perspective.
Okay, this is kind of getting to the nerd territory, but virtuous.
Oh, we crossed that line long ago.
Yes, that's true. So what about virtuous loops and vicious loops? I'm trying to understand, is that just the same thing?
Yeah, okay, that would be a more objective definition of positive and negative. So a virtual cycle or a vicious cycle. A virtual cycle is what I described as one that more resources and more energy are poured into each subsequent iteration, so it's building. So a virtuous cycle is one that's building. A vicious cycle is one that's destroying. In most cases, that is analogous to what I had said, where positive outcomes, negative outcomes, but there are times where the deterioration could be positive. So, I mean, it's a bit semantics. Gotcha. Yeah, however you want to define it, but we have to be, if you're using those terms, be clear. Are you talking about the benefit or harm of the outcome, or are you talking about just inherent growth versus decline?
Yeah. And it seems as though to ground this into something that we've both done, whether intentionally or not, is share things online, which creates this feedback loop of people commenting, asking, showing you your own blind spots. And then we're back here to do something with that, to evolve it, to recreate, to change things. I'm fascinated by that process.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, these things exist everywhere. Once you start looking for them, you see them everywhere. But that's a perfect example, is whether it's audience building or just creating a body of work or learning. I mean, that's also what you could describe as a characteristic of learning. Each of us are learning as we do that. So each iteration, we're putting something out there, we're getting feedback on whether it helps people, whether people agreed with it, disagreed with it, whether it revealed an insight that we didn't have before, both the thing itself and also how people responded to it. And from that, the next time we create something, we're putting that knowledge, insight, discovery, and support potentially, and enthusiasm back into the next iteration. And then that it's more likely the next one will be better, or at least over a number of iterations, because we learned and we grew. So we get better and better with each iteration. We get better feedback. We get more of a reaction. We get a bigger reaction. We're happier. We're more excited. We're more fulfilled because it helped more people. We've learned from it. We put all that into the next iteration, and so on and so on. And you get more confidence, you get more knowledge, you get more skill, and you get better and better as you go. Great example.
Yeah. And on that point, Dave Meyer in the chat has some good ones in here. Expression is echolocation that uses the reverberations from others to help guide future expression.
Nice.
Yeah. As
That's
opposed
awesome.
to shouting into the void, where there is no
Right.
feedback, it's emptiness.
Right. But these patterns can be within your own mind. They can be in a community. They can be at a societal level. They could be at a family level. It could be a machine, a lawnmower running, it could be a lot of things. It could be anything. It's everywhere. Once you start looking at the world this way, you see it everywhere. And it provides insights that help you explain things. Where others are giving you the rote answer, you'll have additional insight to contribute to conversations. But then again, the real power is when you start designing systems and designing these for the outcomes you want. That's what's super exciting to me.
Yeah, because depending on the type of system, but if it's something that's related to the life operating system, then you're basically programming your behavior. I mean, you're at least encouraging yourself to walk down certain paths.
Yeah, in terms of the psychological development, which is a big part of life design, that's absolutely true. And then another fundamental aspect of this that I didn't get into when we were framing the stage is, typically the way we learned in school, the way we are expected to work at our jobs is to specialize, to focus on a component part. You study by learning the component parts with the assumption that you add them together and then you've got the whole. Or we divide everyone up on the assembly line and you have one job and you do that one job. But to really understand something, when those parts are combined and working together, there are what are called emergent properties. Emergence is a quality that comes from a system. I mean, it's the word itself, emergence. And so what you want to be able to do is design for emergence, design this benefit that comes from the parts working together that don't exist independently. And we're taught to study and learn by breaking things down and looking at components, which is necessary. But what is often not done is looking holistically of what emerges by the parts working together and designing for that and looking for understandings of cause and effect because of that. So the distinction between isolating components, which is a typical way of learning and doing in many work environments, is an important distinction to be very cognizant of and to take time to break things down, but also step back and look at things holistically and the interrelationships and what exists with them working together that doesn't exist at all with them in their component parts. It gives a lot of new perspectives.
Yeah, to play off that a bit more, because creativity, creative expression, and there are certain movements around taking things down into first principles and their component parts, a reductionist sort of mentality, and that's really good for us to understand. And yet, however, if we try to partition and silo things like that, I worry that it might limit those emergent properties of ideas colliding. And how do you play with that tension?
The tension between the need to do both?
The need to kind of distill down to fundamental parts, and then the need to design, or the desire to design for emergence.
Yeah, I think by nature, because of our schooling, we tend to do the breakdown and analysis of parts. And it's not one or the other. The emphasis here is on bringing a more holistic thinking in addition. So you will have parts of your process where you're you're compartmentalizing and studying elements, but then you need to design parts of the learning process for holistic into studying for this emergence, looking for it and looking broader and broader and wider systems. Now, the problem is it gets, the broader you go, the more complex it gets. And at a certain point, you just can't comprehend it. I mean, the systems thinking is often called the study of complexity. And so you need to, that's why we draw boundaries, is to make it comprehensible. So the idea is you look at in any component part is itself a system. You know, if you're looking at how a car works, there's a seatbelt system, there's a steering system, you know, there's a braking system. Those all make the car. The car itself is a system. Then the car is part of the transportation system, you know, which is part of other systems. So the components are each systems, and you need to look at those as systems. But then again, this goes to the original point of whatever system you're looking at to really understand it, you must then look at the system it operates within, because the definition or the defining characteristics of anything you're looking at is how it interacts with the larger system. We define a car not as tires and seatbelts, but as a way to get around at a certain speed with a certain carrying capacity, with a certain level of attention required. That's sort of what makes a car and why we care about it. So it's the recognition that no matter what component you're looking at, it is itself a system and it's part of a larger system. So study it and the microsystems underneath it, but then study the systems it participates within. It's totally fractal. So you can zoom in as micro as you want or zoom out as broad as you want. You see this similar, self-similar recurring patterns at every level. And these loops, whether they're feedback loops or just standard loops and patterns, they repeat themselves at all levels of the system, not identically, but in self-similar ways. So once you see sort of recurring patterns in one level, you can zoom out and zoom in, see similar patterns at micro and macro levels. And those insights sort of give you greater insights and understanding of what's happening. So, but you got to look wide, you got to look narrow. So it's zooming in and out of a fractal.
I know I don't know how everyone else is doing, so I'm kind of curious because I'm loving this, and but then we'll take a breather and kind of see where we're going. But I have one more that I kind of want to go into, and it's about that sort of fractal nature, because sometimes I'll be looking at something in knowledge management. So, you know, kind of where I'm saying is sometimes we capture something new, and then we link it to so we capture something, we put it into a note, and then we link that note to another related idea. And so for me, this is still sort of divergent. Sometimes that will spark a new idea. And so I'm labeling a divergence on it because I'm at that level. But it's just as what I struggle with, and I know it's sort of semantics, but it's just the lens upon which you view it, because tell me if I'm wrong here, but then if you just zoom out a little bit, what looked like divergence is actually a form of convergence, or you could even say it's emergence. And that's where it's like, it's almost like you just have to become Neo from the Matrix and just see the lines of code and be like, it's everything all at once.
Right. And these link-based technology platforms like Obsidian are so great at sort of revealing both the fractal qualities, but also the emergence and the power that the network creates. You know, it's sort of the perfect example. But yeah, depending on, I mean, to me, convergence and divergence as a process for accomplishing something is more of a frame of mind. And you're right, a lot of the components could be approached from a convergent way or from a divergent way, depending on your openness or if you're rushing for a deadline and you got to pull something together, then you're converging. But if you're in the early stages and you're exploring and you're brainstorming, the same components could be approached in a convergent way. So to me, yeah, the same components could be addressed through either approach, if that gets to the heart of what you're asking.
Yeah, I think so. I just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about those terms and how it kind of just what changes to make something. So what you're kind of saying is, you know, it can be part of one's approach to change whether it's now a divergent thing or a convergent thing.
Well,
or
yeah, systems thinking tends to be divergent because you're looking broader and more holistically. You're being more open to things you hadn't previously considered. It's interesting to compare systems thinking with design thinking, which are the two are sometimes thought to be opposites and competing ideas. because design thinking is about a 4-step process, typically, to come to a result. You're focused on the end client, how to deliver this satisfaction to the end client. That's the purpose of the design process. This is a commercial design methodology that's very popular. And you go through stages, one's divergent, one's convergent, and then another divergent, then another convergent to come to the answer. But you're very focused on components along the way. And it's very actionable. It's about getting it done, delivering. Systems thinking is the criticism, and the reason you can't do only systems thinking is you're exploring broad things and you're never really coming to a solution. And you're broadening your view, you're adding more perspectives, but it doesn't get you to an answer and it doesn't get you to a final shippable product. Design thinking gets you there, but systems thinking helps you understand the environment and it gives you better answers. So the ability to do both together, maybe even at different stages, is a really powerful combination, even though they're often considered competing approaches.
Well, thanks for diving into the weeds with me. And for anyone who's interested in systems, this is literally a gold mine. But we're going to zoom out for a second, take a breath, and kind of go into exploring some of the tools, what we think about them, life operating systems, and some of the goals around all of this. So Dan, just want to know if there's anything in the Q&A in particular that we should maybe talk about now, or if we should just jump into a little bit more of the PKMs and life operating system stuff.
I'm just looking at the Q&A, and top question that we have in terms of upvotes is a question from Paul. Paul is asking, what are some books, video, course recommendations for learning about systems thinking?
I have a list. I'll post this. I don't know. Whenever you post the video, I'll send you the list of recommended books. But I think the best place to start is Donna Meadows' book on systems thinking. I think that's the first one. But there's sort of a series I recommend in order.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I've heard of that book and I should have read it by now. But getting your recommendation, all right, it's time to go for it.
Yeah, but I think even before that, it doesn't need to be that complicated. Just start looking for the cause and effect patterns of everything around you. And think about where you might define boundaries on a system. I mean, it's somewhat arbitrary, but there are some logical things. I myself am a system. My way I approach and do my day is a system, but I'm also part of my family. My family is a system, and my company is a system. My family and my company are part of my neighborhood. My neighborhood's got its own system, way it flows and works. That's part of a society. It's part of a country. It's part of a region. Just look at natural boundaries and how there's overlap and how the functions outside of it are influencing the microsystems within it. You can just discover so much of this by observing.
I like that. Looking for the natural boundaries.
Yeah. And then within your life design system or your knowledge management system, what are the subsystems within it? There's the capture system. There's the retrieval system. There's the project management system. There's the habits and routines system. Understand, and then you see the connectivity between them and how they fuel and inform each other. So, and as we get into the tools here, we can talk more practically about how it manifests in the things that we're interested in here.
Yeah, totally. And that's a really good segue to it. So we have knowledge management, systems tools. We have something that might be a little bit broader, is how we manage our lives. We could also call that a life operating system. Is that how you see it? Of
which knowledge management is a subsystem within.
Yes.
So that's your life management system, or called life operating system, is a system that the knowledge management system is a component within. And then your knowledge management system has systems inside of it, such as your capture system.
Yeah.
Or your linking system.
So absolutely. And so you've chosen, as you kind of alluded to, Notion currently as a tool where you're managing all of this.
Yeah, in Notion, I gravitated toward Notion because of my fascination and the power I see in this system design approach. And, and at the time, Obsidian wasn't out, even Rome wasn't out where I started using Notion. But I love those tools. Now that I see them, I'm excited about their possibilities as well. But the reason I keep Notion as the core for what I'm doing is I love the idea of this interconnectivity and the power that emerges when it's all speaking to each other. And unfortunately, at this stage in time, there isn't a lot of connectivity, at least not automated connectivity between the different tools. It's very frustrating. I mean, even Notion, which has released its API, it's still quite limited. And then, Obsidian and Rome, I don't think Obsidian has an API, does it?
Oh gosh, I should know
Oh
that because I'm
no,
not such a programmer.
no, Rome doesn't.
Yeah,
So it could, but they're new. I mean,
Obsidian has something
new
for
apps.
plugin developers at least.
Yeah,
But
they do
they're
have
new.
internal development for more sophisticated, skilled developers. But that's the thing about new software is the API usually doesn't come right away. They're focused on the features and the thing that it does. So, and there's often this comparison, Obsidian versus Notion, which should I use? Well, they're all great. First of all, we have so many riches right now. It's like you really can't go wrong with the leading tools. They're all so good, but they each have strengths and weaknesses, and they're going to be pros and cons, whatever you choose. But with Notion, to me, the big difference that I see, I would love to hear your perspective on this because you definitely bring a lot of innovative thinking on this as well. Obsidian is a specialized tool for a specific purpose. It's what has been called note taking, but you have elevated to note making. But it's a tool designed for that, bringing your notes, your ideas, and connecting them, and having emergent qualities arise more naturally through those interrelations of the notes. But Notion to me is not a note taking or note making app. It can do that, but fundamentally, it's a development platform. Now, you can argue that coding is a development platform and Notion is not, but really, at any level of software design, you have the root level machine language ones and zeros, and you have levels of abstraction. With each level of abstraction, it's more accessible, more people can do it, requires less training, but it's less versatile into what it can actually tell the machine to do. Notion is introducing a new level. So it's above coding. It can't do everything that coding can do, even at the higher level coding languages, but it can do more than a specialized finished app. It essentially lets people who can't code build their own SaaS application for personal use, not so much for distributing and selling with a SaaS subscription, but for your own personal use. That's pretty revolutionary. And I hadn't seen anything that could do that before. Now, it is limited in terms of how it communicates with others. At the time when I started, it didn't have any communication really with others. Now it has some, but it's still quite limited. Obsidian and Rome and Logsec and these tools, which are amazing and I'm super excited about, they do a narrower set of things, but they do it really well with more polish and more features within that specific set, but they don't have the breadth of things you can design and build. Would you consider that a fair characterization?
I'd say it's reasonable. I probably feel though Obsidian's a bit broader, although I'm not saying it can do what Notion can do. So typically the stuff that I focus on is absolutely, it's the note taking, mostly the note making. My big thing is, we're capturing too much information. Let's actually reduce that ratio to, let's say, 50 to 20%. So we have all this room to actually work on playing with ideas and building from there. But I'm just one of many. And I think the one thing that I don't want to say push back on, but just kind of illuminate is all the different use cases that have surprised me with how they're taking this tool. So it kind of is an unshapen ball of clay, just a different one, because Notion is that too. It's just a different version of it. And what it can't do very well now, and there's some hope, is anything collaborative. And they just came out with something with being able to kind of work on a vault together, but it is, that was never the intention starting out. Whereas when you look at Notion, and that's why we're currently using it for our tiny little team at Linking Your Thinking, is because that way we can share this link and everyone can see it. We can make comments. And so it's trying to do something else, but that's where there are more overlaps in what you like in use case with Obsidian. And that's where it's kind of hard to pin down, because right when I think I understand it, then somebody is using it for something completely different. And I really am blown away by it. There was an eye doctor who was using it as sort of a diagnostic tool. So they would have a new patient and they would compare the images, whatever spectro image they had, to an existing database of information. And then they'd say, this is the issue. And I mean, you can do that. So it's really interesting because I don't have a clear definition on on either really, because everyone surprises me with what they can do. But there are
Yeah,
strengths. You're absolutely right.
I have seen more use cases for Notion. So I haven't seen the breadth that exists for Obsidian. I should clarify that I do understand that in Obsidian, coding level development can be done to introduce new capabilities. I'm talking for the non-coder, like someone who doesn't have programming skills. So I understand that Obsidian has a lot of versatility for developing if you have programming skills. I'm talking about it from the level of someone who doesn't come in with those skills, which is most of us, to shape it into what we want. So that was, I was
Yes.
making that assumption in my description.
Yeah, and that's fair. I mean, with Obsidian, it takes you get more hand holding with Notion, and I think I don't want to disparage it by saying jack of all trades, because it's masterful in many, but its
Sure.
user set is so broad, because you can use it for your personal, you can use it for team and collaborative features as well, and that's really nothing to scoff at.
Yeah, and that's part of the frustration, though. And I can imagine for Notion themselves. Can you imagine the feature requests for Notion? Like for any other app, they have a long list, but they're working on a specific, well-defined range of use cases. Notion is the use case range is unprecedented. So the feature requests are unprecedented. So it is a challenge and has, in some regards, slower development as a result of that. So again, there are pros and cons endlessly between the choices.
There are, and like you said, it's an abundance of riches right now with what we can use for each tool. And so it's kind of for everyone on the call too, to kind of consider what your use cases are, and where are you working with a team? Well, how are you going to communicate with them? And that would be a checkbox in using a tool like Notion. There are other tools out there, of course. For me, the big thing that I guess I've always come to the table to do, like with technology, is find a way to ground my thinking, to ground my thoughts. And so it's like this, almost this personal thinking sanctuary. And using a tool like Obsidian's wonderful for that, because now we are doing the note making side of things, and it's very seamless to jump from note to note and do that sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, it'd be
you nailed it right there.
From others too.
You nailed it right there. Though that is, what is your objective? Is the starting point for anything, and it depends on your needs and the things you're doing in your life, the complexity or diverse elements of your life. If you're a student in school, if you're doing a PhD thesis, if you're living in ideas and developing new ideas, if you're a research professor or R&D lab person who has to, and it's all about the ideas, or you're a composer and you're obsessed with music, and that is you want the very best process for developing and thinking, then you're going to put a heavier emphasis on knowledge management and the process of discovery and exploring and combining ideas. And then you can sacrifice other things to get the very best of that. I have a vast range of things going on in my life. I'm running a company. I am thinking about ideas. I'm creating content to share ideas. I have a family with a lot of things going on. So to me, I need balance and I need transparency across a diverse range of operations. And that's what I prioritize over any one component of the operation. So with Notion, I get that range of functionality that speaks to each other, but I'm sacrificing some things in knowledge management, for example, or some things even in task management. Todoist can do task management better than Notion, but Todoist can't connect to my higher level aspirations in life and keep them like physically aligned, because it doesn't even, I mean, it kind of has projects, but not really. It definitely doesn't have any serious goal setting, or really not any project management, but the task management's great. But so I'm giving up some of the elegance and the interface of task management to have the connectivity and the alignment between my day-to-day activities, my hour-to-hour activities, and my highest level life aspirations. And to me, that's precious, that alignment. And I'm willing to give up the best task management or the best knowledge management to have that. So again, it totally depends on what is most important in your life. So it starts by thinking, what is my priority? What's most important for me to get out of the tool or system that I'm designing?
Let's go in the chat with that one. What is my priority?
What are your priorities?
Do I want?
All of you.
Yeah. What are your priorities? What are you trying to get out of, the tools that you're using? Is there a way to phrase that question that you'd like to see, August? Like
No,
objectives?
I mean, what are you trying to have your technology systems achieve and deliver for you? Is it comprehensive? Is it specialized? Within those specialized tools, I mean, you have to think about your life, right? And the season of your life you're in. Of course, this is going to change for the same person in different stages of their life, right? The family stage, the early starting out in your career stage, the retirement stage, wildly different objectives in your life. And you need different tools and different setups, even with the same tool, to best, have organization and clarity and progress.
Yeah, there are some good ones coming in here now too. So let's see, getting to my goals, research, owning my notes of thought and them being saved in a simple universal format, building knowledge.
Nice. Benjamin's here. The ability to change between micro and macro. Great thought, Ben.
Micro, macro.
So clarity, that's kind of clarity at different perspectives, right? That's almost that fractal perspective. When you can zoom in, you can zoom out easily, jump between different levels. That's one of the things I was talking about with alignment between your day-to-day activities to your highest level life aspirations and all the tiers in between.
Yeah,
I can relate to that one.
And there is a certain thread of security concerns I think we should at least bring up with Notion for personal knowledge management.
Yep.
And you probably have some
with
thoughts
any
on
cloud-based platform, really.
With any cloud, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, if it's in the cloud, it's in the cloud, right? So these platforms have security protocols. They publish them, they share them. I actually had a conversation with Akshay Kathare on my podcast about security with Notion, and they take it very seriously. I mean, they realize a major security breach would be a major breach of trust with the customer and quite damaging to their business. So they take it seriously, but a cloud-based system that doesn't have end-to-end encryption, you can have end-to-end encryption, but then you lose a lot of functionality, even search, if they can't see what's happening in the middle. So there's a convenience versus security trade-off. Now, Obsidian does something quite elegant and wonderful, but it's also not doing the breadth of things that Notion is. So you can highlight that difference, I think, with the local storage of the notes.
Yeah, absolutely. So with the way Obsidian locally stores notes, there's zero knowledge if encryption. It's end-to-end encrypted, meaning that if you choose to set up a password for your synced vault, then Obsidian doesn't have that password or any ability to get the developers don't have any way in. If they're hacked, nobody who hacks them has any way into your knowledge. I think a really good hybrid too that I'm using right now. So here's me, is everything that's personal to me. So my PKM is done in Obsidian, but with talking with the team, that stuff isn't as, I mean, hey, if someone gets our ideas for how we want to launch the next workshop, it's like, I'm okay with that. So there's that convenience, that trade-off between convenience and security. And, it takes us back to, the only privacy policy that matters is yours. And you have to kind of be at peace with what that is, but bring some thought to it, I think, and have like some intention.
For sure. You need to draw a line with something like Notion or Evernote, anything in the cloud. You need to draw the line of what you're comfortable with putting there and what you're not. You just deliberately make that decision. And then, sensitive medical records, perhaps children, information on your children, credit cards, obviously. There are apps designed for security, even some cloud-based ones. Use those or have a local storage. You draw the line, but the benefit of a cloud-based system is vast, right? So the trade-offs are big. It's not only convenience, but it's also functionality. There's functionality you can't do if it's end-to-end encrypted and local, right? And so there will be some different tool specialization for different levels of security requirement. So it's just the decision you need to make. I wish it were clearer and easier for non-technical people to assess the risk level, the threat level, so we can make a better and more informed decision on that line, where that line is. But I mean, it's not that hard. What are the really sensitive documents, papers, and thoughts? Perhaps that could be, your journal. You might put in pen and paper in the drawer, unless you don't care. But it's the person call. But you give up a lot when you get the hardcore privacy and security. It's a trade-off.
It is. There are two questions I definitely want to get to in the chat, but also, Dan, is there anything that we're missing that you want to hop in on?
Yes, I'm seeing the chat. We have a couple of questions here, and I'm going to sum up a couple of the questions that were brought up early on. And we have a lot of different people joining us. And a quick reminder for everyone who's just jumping in, this is August Bradley and Nick Milo's discussion on PKM within a broader life operating system. So August, I do have two questions. The first question is, how would you define a life operating system to a 7-year-old? And the second part to that question is, would, can you share an example on how this works?
How life operating system works?
Yes.
Okay. To the 7-year-old, life operating system lets you identify what you value most in life, define what you want to achieve in life, and map out the steps you need to take on a daily and weekly basis to achieve it, while capturing the information and knowledge and learning you need to support that path and journey. So in terms of what this looks like is generally there are two parts. I mean, you could break it into many different categorizations, but my system is called pillars, pipelines, and vaults. And really the two fundamental parts are the pipelines and the vaults. Pillars are just an organizational structure. So the pipelines are identifying what you value most in life and find most meaningful, identifying the goals and things you want to achieve in life, identifying projects and habits and routines to achieve those, and then daily activities to implement the habits and routines and the projects. That's pipelines. Those are things moving through stages of process to a point of completion, getting things done, but most importantly, making sure the things you're working on are the things you care most about, because we cannot do everything. There's way more that we want to do. There's way more that sounds exciting to do than we're capable of doing in the time we have. So it's about ruthlessly prioritizing what truly matters to us, because we have an understanding of what we value in life and what brings life meaning to us. And then very clearly drawing direct lines at different stages of goals, projects, habits, routines, and task implementation. So what we do day by day, hour by hour, is moving us toward what our highest value, our highest aspirations in life. That's pipelines. Vaults is in pillars, pipelines, and vaults, the knowledge management system. It's where we capture the information and develop the ideas and thinking and insights that we need to learn and grow. And then that is connected with the items in the pipeline, the projects, the habits we're developing, the aspirations we have to inform it. That's how, on a high level, how it works. Happy to go deeper.
Yeah, no, and that's really good. And what we're talking about is, I'm just so happy to discuss this stuff with you, because it is conceptual. And I know there are a few people that are like, but explain to me like I'm 5 and show me practical examples. We could show you all the examples in the world, but we don't have the time. And
I don't think a 5-year-old needs a life operating system, quite frankly. Go play.
That's a really good point. Yeah. Eat some ice cream for now.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's pretty.
I think perhaps what may be an interesting element of the life operating system in knowledge management is the reason that I stick with most of my knowledge management in Notion, rather than the wonderful things that are capable in these other link-based platforms, is the idea of resurfacing in context. Now, you can do resurfacing in context in a link-based system like Roam or Logstash or Obsidian, of course, but you're resurfacing largely in the context of other ideas, which is super valuable. Like, that's great for thinking. But I also want it to resurface when I'm sitting to work on this project, when I'm going into the page for this dashboard for this client, when I'm developing ideas broadly, when I'm working on a video for my YouTube channel, or I'm writing a blog post, or I'm preparing for a meeting. And all of these things have a dashboard and a space in the pipelines part of my PPV system, the life operating system. That is not, Obsidian is not going to be well designed to do project task goal management. It can be done, but it's not going to have the connectivity, fluidity, and process flow management capabilities of Notion. So by having all of the pipelines, the processes, things I'm implementing to the point of completion, each of those has a dashboard at the macro level and the micro level and everywhere in between, where I can see everything happening for that slice. all my knowledge management will resurface in the context of any slice I open and look at. That's the value to me of having it all under one roof. I wish the two could communicate fluidly together. Then I could use the best interface for any given situation. Someday,
Yeah.
I think that'll be possible.
There's a real value too. I mean, if you haven't seen any of August's YouTube videos, when you have a bunch of thoughts and you can see them resurface in context, whether it's for knowledge purposes and for action purposes, because that's a Venn diagram that often overlaps. It's a truly powerful thing. There are two questions I think in the Q&A I want to talk about. One's from Azul, and then the other's from Tobias. And Azul's question is, August, I've always been interested in PPV, but one thing that has held me back is my fear that the rigor of the framework could introduce more friction than a free-form system. I am a knowledge worker. I get paid to have a handful of great ideas per year. What are your thoughts on friction structure versus a free-form Andy Matuszak type of system? Thank you for your wonderful YouTube videos.
Great. That's a great question. So a couple thoughts there. First of all, there's two kinds of friction. There's the initial getting started investment, which is real and takes effort to get it started. One of the downsides of Notion, even if you're starting with something like PPV or an existing framework, you have to learn Notion, you have to learn the framework, and then you have to get it set up. That takes time. That's real friction. It takes effort. That's an investment. Once it's set up, it actually simplifies and clarifies. It doesn't add friction, it reduces friction. It brings incredible transparency on what's happening where. It reduces anxiety because you know everything's taken care of. You don't have these loose threads constantly hanging over you. You can let go because you know you checked that, you did that review, that's in place. Most of the effort working in the system is actually doing the work, actually advancing the project, implementing your goals and your aspirations. That's the vast majority. It's in the same platform. You can do the work in the same place as the system, which is wonderful. So, but that's not actually maintaining the system. That's just doing your work. The little bit of maintenance is weekly, monthly reviews to keep things on track and to realign anything that's starting to get out of whack. That's a little bit of effort. And in the way I teach it, a startup routine that could be 15 minutes, a wind down routine that's usually about 10 minutes. That's relatively little time to invest for the massive benefit of having primed yourself in the morning to put yourself in the best frame for success for the day, identifying what you need to achieve very specifically for that day to be a success. Most people go in, they don't know, they just look at their list, they react to the new things that come up. They don't know how to evaluate a surprise versus what they planned. And you just get bounced around and you don't have any clarity on the direction you need to be heading. This brings you clarity on what to do when and when to deviate from that. So it brings in ease and a reduction in anxiety because everything's taken care of. But this goes to the thought that Nick, you and I have talked about, the Jocko Willink's comment, discipline equals freedom. Bringing discipline into your life isn't constraining. It sounds like it's going to be restrictive. Oh, this discipline, that's not freedom. Discipline frees you because if you bring the discipline to do the work, when you tell yourself you're going to do it, you can let go of everything else when you're not doing the work. You don't have it hanging over you. This anxiety isn't following you. This worry about all these loose threads that you can't keep all in your mind because there are too many of them. When you have a system, and this goes to David Allen's premise of take it out of your mind, put it in, document it so that it's tracked and monitored in its place. And you know that you have a regular time to check in, and you've checked on it. It's taken care of. It's lined up. It's queued up. You don't have to worry about it. So when you are not working, when you're free, you're truly free. You can actually relax. You can actually carve out time to be in the moment with your family, with your hobbies, with your passions, whatever. You don't have this dread following you everywhere because everything's taken care of. That's what discipline gives you. And it actually gives you blocks of time because if you don't sit down and do the work, you're either going to have to skip the fun time or you're going to have to do the fun time with the dread of all the stuff that's hanging over you. So that's that. So it actually, once it's set up, so it's hard to set up, that's friction to set up. Once it's set up, life is easier, clearer, and much smoother. Now, I will also say PPV isn't for everybody. No system is for everybody. PPV is for Pillars, Pipelines, and Vaults for people who want to make a big change and really put a big effort It's typically either for people who nothing's worked and they want to put a big commitment in to be sure to actually get things on track, or there's people that things are going really well, but they'll do anything for that last 10%. And this is a big discipline system to take you to the last 10%. People in the middle, life's good, things are okay, they're happy with incremental improvements. That's great. PPV is probably not for you. It's a big effort up front that delivers big transformational benefits as a result. But not everybody wants or needs a big investment up front. So not for everybody.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And also is just this like, do you want the acute upfront friction now of creating the systems, or the chronic leaky friction that is with you every single day, all that uncertainty? And yeah, I think you probably have a few PPVers on this call now, and they can probably, I think they can speak to some of the greatness with that program. I mean, in the systems, because they're pretty amazing. And before, we're just getting close to the end of time, so I want to make sure, where can people learn more about your stuff, August? I know Dan shared it, but maybe you just want to say it out loud.
I appreciate that. Yeah, so the YouTube channel is the biggest expression of it in the free context. So the YouTube channel walks through in the original version of the PPV system, and now I'm expanding on the psychology and approaches to enhancing one's life. My website is yearzero.io. That's got my current course for life design, my future course for teams, and coaching and consulting. And then I'm very active on Twitter and LinkedIn. So happy to chat with anybody there. Appreciate that, Nick.
Yeah, well, totally. And I'm, as I've said privately, I'm very interested in the teams version, because yeah, what I did was, I was like, oh, what does August have? Okay, the personal one. Oh, let's kind of like take it and we'll use it as a team. But once the team ones is there, that's going to
they're not unrelated. It is both working off of the same framework, but there's a big difference for systems for teams than there is for systems for individuals. So it really called for a separate program. But that is one of the strengths of Notion, collaboration. So excited to have a program that goes really deep into that as well.
So instead of claps, we're doing takeaways in the chat. So did this get you thinking? You don't have to agree with anything I said. You don't have to agree with anything that August said. It's better if you don't.
The most important thing, is to spark thoughts and to examine it. Think of what systems are going to work for you, what environments you operate within, for sure. Well put, Nick.
Yeah, absolutely. So throw a few takeaways that you've had in the chat. Are you going to try something new? Has it made you really double down on like, yes, what I'm doing already is what I want. Here's what I'm going to do next. Did it get you clarity on your objectives and your goals? Oh, wait a second. I am a manual laborer for 18 hours a day. I don't have time for any system. That could be an actual answer.
That could be a warning that you more than ever need a system. It's like the thing with the people who don't have time for meditation are the ones who need meditation the most. It's like this irony in the situation. It's also like automations. It's like, take the time up front. If you're doing something over and over, it's going to take more time up front, or delegation, or hiring a VA. Investing time up front pays off big over the months and years afterwards, but it takes some sacrifice up front.
Yeah. Design for emergence is really what seems to be coming out for me. And a little bit of setup now is worth a lot less pain later.
That's how you get to higher and higher levels, and not just treading water the whole time. There's this sense that so many of us have that we're running on a treadmill. You got to break that if you want to actually progress. If what's got you, if what you're doing now isn't working, more of it isn't going to work any better.
There's a question. Let's get this one. Will the course for teams be at the same time as coaching consulting? Are you able to answer at this time?
In terms of when coaching and consulting will be ramped up, yes. We're going to be introducing more coaching and consulting at the time the teams program launches. Yes.
Okay. That's great. I think we've about covered it. I know we're going to do our best to hold on to a few of these Q&As and send them to you separately, August, so you can kind of chew on those and then share them on Twitter or whatever's easiest.
Happy to.
If you have the time. Okay. I'm so thankful to have this conversation with you. It's, seeing you on YouTube for such a long time, and what you bring, this really calm and holistic outlook on what is possible using, digital knowledge in all of its various forms. It has been inspiring, and I think you inspired several of us on here.
Well, I appreciate that, but I've also been inspired by your innovative thinking and fresh approaches. So I learn from you all the time, as well as the whole community. I mean, what an amazing community this is. The passion, the energy, and the thinking. I mean, this thinking-oriented community brings so many fresh ideas, and it's exciting to be a part of it. So a real privilege to be in a conference like this one.
Well, thank you so much. So with that, goodbye, everyone. I'll play some music on our outro, but signing off for now. Bye-bye.
Bye.